Hey guys, it's Jack, and I've just been thinking about some random challenges recently, and wow, there's been a lot done on Drag Race. I've done videos on all of the standard challenges of Drag Race, but now let's move on to the one-offs that just got me thinking, what is happening? I love when Drag Race tries to branch out with these challenges or put a variation on something that we know, because after so many seasons, things can start to get stale. But overall, looking back at these challenges, I do think they're really entertaining, but at the same time, I'm like, wow, how did this even happen? Also, if you enjoy the video or my content in general, please consider subscribing. Like the video and turn on post notifications so you can always stay up to date with my content. So let's get the very obvious one out of the way, the one that everyone kind of points to as the craziest challenge of Drag Race, or at least the most dangerous. That, of course, being the cheerleading challenge from season 9. I've talked about this one before. I mean, I've done a whole video on the history of injuries on Drag Race. To me, this challenge is so interesting because it's a pretty out there concept that they did pretty recently also. A majority of the other challenges on this list tend to skew a little older because they were still trying to experiment with a lot of different things. But with this challenge, it felt like they took a side turn back into the old days and just experimented where they really didn't need to, and look at the outcome. I've now tried to simplify the reasoning that they did this challenge down to the fact that they just moved to VH1 and they had a big room now, and they just wanted to use it for a challenge in some way, so cheerleading was the first idea and they just went with it. Because to me, any other reasoning does not make sense because it's just a dangerous thing to do for untrained drag queens in the art of cheer. Like, you walk into Drag Race and yeah, maybe you expect to do some choreography for like a rusical, but no, now it's episode 2 and you're the designated flyer and you're getting lifted and thrown into the air. I don't think I'm mistaken when I say that this challenge was the one that resulted in the most injuries ever on the show. A lot of the queens have said that basically everyone walked away from the challenge with at least soreness or a little bit of injury, and of course it led to the first medical disqualification of the show with Eureka injuring their knee in a life-changing way. They're doing great now, but at the time, seeing this injury on Drag Race was very shocking because it wasn't something anyone has seen before. It was overall just a very risky challenge to do from the start, and it had very little positives in the end, and they came away with mostly negatives. Let's just get all of the really physically demanding challenges out of the way. Up next, I want to talk about the Drag Olympics from season 11. To me, everything that's asked here is a lot more standard Drag Race, but still put it all together and it gets just a little grueling to watch. The performance was really long, they were running around a ton, and some queens' bodies just don't really do the moves that they're asking of, and if I was on that show, I'd kind of be freaking out, to be honest. Going into Drag Race, of course, you have to have some coordination. That was basically the whole storyline of the episode with Scarlett. But asking them to hit shablams and dips, it felt like the queens who actually could do those had an advantage in the challenge. With other choreography challenges, of course, you still have to hit the moves, but I feel like with other ones, there's a way to get away with it with characterization or just being a little funny. For example, Black Swan on season 5 expected the queens to hit the choreography, but they also had a character to play. So some queens who weren't really considered dancers, someone like Jinx, still did well in the challenge. But here, it's kind of a black and white, oh, you can't hit the moves? Well, I guess you're in the bottom now. I just don't like when there's a very clear writing on the wall for a queen in a challenge if they can't really get into it, and this is one of the main examples, and the judging really proves that. Let's pop back to a challenge that's maybe even more physically demanding than the cheer challenge, something that people maybe try to forget. The wrestling challenge from season 4 is honestly, I love it for some reason. I don't know. Let's get it out of the way. I don't want them to do this again because Madame LaQueer hurt her ankle, and overall it does seem like it could lead to a lot of injury. But for the singular time that they could get away with it, I enjoyed it so much, and it's kind of a really cool challenge that they did. Back in 2011, 2012, I think wrestling was pretty big, so that's why they did the challenge, and they got trainers to come in to choreograph with the queens. What was happening here? The queens really went for it with everything that they had to do. People were getting slammed, thrown around. It was honestly a great performance. And on top of that, coming back to the whole idea of characterization in the Drag Olympics where we couldn't really get that, they worked in pairs with each pair having a different characterization that they needed to accomplish. And overall, combining Drag Race and wrestling, it could have been a lot more confusing, but it was messy in a kind of concise way. Like, the overall point was to be messy, but they got this format down. The queens really went for it with the choreography and the performance, and it just led to this fever dream of a time that I honestly really enjoyed. They definitely won't do it again because of the risk of injury, and wrestling isn't really topical like it was at the time, but I'd be down for them to hire some other professionals to help them perform stunts, maybe like stage performance, you know? Like, you know how Rue did the slaps until he accidentally slapped Asia for real? Expand that into a whole challenge with the queens acting and then having to perform perform a stunt at the end, like, I don't know, breaking through a table or something. I think there are ways to do physical comedy and put these queens in situations that they're not really familiar with without having to risk them getting injured. Stage performances and stunts can be pretty fun, or maybe even magic. Oh wait, they did magic. Let's talk about another challenge from season 11, Dragacadabra. Again, they took a professional from another entertainment field that still does live performance and a magician. Then he taught them some tricks, and then they were tasked to do improv alongside it. And though the judging was really bad this episode, I honestly liked the performance. It's not a grueling task to ask the queens to do these tricks. Even if they mess up, they can still play it off. It just adds a little extra spice alongside the improv, which was the main point of the challenge. It's a pretty weird challenge that I would never really expect them to do right off the bat, but if the judging wasn't as bad as it was this episode, I could actually see this one being remembered fondly. Keeping with the same theme of putting a twist on a challenge, let's talk about the pop art ball in All Stars 3. If you don't remember this ball, they dressed up in giant cans. Does that ring a bell now? Andy Warhol is an icon, and I'm so glad that they paid tribute to him with this ball, but why did they dress up as giant cans? Okay, I know why. It's really campy, it's so stupid, but when you think about it again, you're like, what was that? They were really trying to put a twist on it, and I do really appreciate that, but the fact that instead of doing pop art, they did a giant can costume, it felt like it was a little bit of a missed opportunity. I'm happy that we eventually did get the pop art runway on All Stars 6, but this ball was only 2 categories, and I'm greedy and love pop art, and I wish it was here too. People remember this episode mostly because of the way Aja was eliminated and how frustrating it was, but just like with the magic challenge, looking at just the challenge on paper, though ridiculous, it's really cool. We got the history for Andy Warhol in Studio 54, and it felt like a love letter and only a way that Drag Race can do it.
Flashbacks because we had to brand soup cans in All Stars, and it was part of our ball. Do you have any memories of that stick out?
I have repressed a lot of it. We had to wear a barrel and suspenders like a poor mouse from a cartoon in the 40s.
Yes! I'll never forget that soup thing. Sometimes I have memories of that. I'm just like, what was that?
Yeah, no, it comes to me, I like lurch straight upright in bed, just screaming.
But now I want to take you back to 2 challenges that I adore, but we could probably never do again. Those being the 2 on the streak performances in All Stars 1 and Season 2. I'll start off with All Stars 1 because Season 2 has other things that I do want to talk about because it's also very unique. I love this challenge so much in All Stars 1 because it is just a mess and chaos in all the best ways. They had a list of tasks that random people in public had to do, like feed the queens grapes, let the queen spray whipped cream down their pants, put on a diaper and cry for their mommy. And people actually did it. This is Drag Race's take on Impractical Jokers, and overall, it is just one of the best challenges they've ever done. Best challenges in terms of entertainment, but for actual judging, I don't really know how you can judge this. And it's clear the judges didn't either because Chanel and Chad won because they had the most points, but then judging the rest of them, they didn't judge them based off of points for the tasks that they got. They just kind of made an offhanded comment like, oh, your energy was low in the beginning, people were running away from you, which, okay. And then they just mostly gave critiques for the runways of the queens, so the main challenge almost didn't apply except for the person who won. So for that reason, I don't think they can do this type of challenge again, and then there's 2 other reasons that I look towards for why they can't do it. One reason is to do with production. I don't think they want the cast spoiled this early. Drag Race is very high profile, a lot of people are detectives and know which queens are going to be on the seasons before they're announced, but if they were to do a challenge like this, people can figure out who was eliminated first, or if a queen was doing a challenge like this and then goes out into public after, people know they were eliminated and they can find out the order even easier. So it's just not in WoW's best interest to put the queens in public like this, and the other reason, it's a little more heavy. It's honestly a very scary time to be a drag queen in today's day. There's a lot of attention on drag queens right now and a lot of targets being put on the backs, and I don't think WoW wants to put them in this situation. Keeping the queens safe and queer people in general should be the utmost priority, and I don't think WoW wants to risk that by putting them in public. So like with the wrestling challenge, this one is very of the time, and though I really do eat it up, I would never want to put a queen in this situation just for their safety. Sorry to bring down the mood, but moving on to season 2, they were also out in public, but just to sell tickets. This was half of their challenge, having to sell tickets to a show, and I guess it was asking them to be good spokespeople or something. It was an interesting thing to ask them to do. Just seeing these queens interact with random people, trying to sell tickets to people who have no interest in going to this show. I feel bad for them, but they really camped it up, and I don't think they were having a bad time. It was episode 2, and it was like, just go out on the street and we'll just record you guys guys trying to sell tickets. Just go do it. And they got a good amount of content from it. The other half of the challenge is another thing that we haven't seen again, but honestly, I kind of wish we would. It's a performance challenge where the queens have to pole dance. They were strippers. Okay, they were strippers. And here, of course, the queens who could really do good in performance had the advantage, but even queens who couldn't really move as well, they can camp it up and still get a good amount of money. I think it was a really cool challenge that they could honestly bring back because there's still a lot of stigma around this type of work, and I don't think there really should be, and I think they could look at it through a new lens, you know, the very positive squeaky queen modern drag race lens. In the past, they emphasized how amazing these types of performers are, but there was still kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing of, oh, look how ridiculous these queens are, as opposed to kind of just embracing the work as it is. It does run into the same issue as All Stars 1 with a kind of point system going on with how much money each of the queens makes, but if they drop that side of it and just kind of focus on what the queens are doing on stage, I think it could be a good challenge. So let's move on to the final one I want to talk about today, and one that a lot of people really dislike. The Pink Table Talk from All Stars 6 is a very weird, interesting challenge. It's not bad because we do get to learn a lot about the queens, but there's just this hovering ultimatum over the whole challenge. Basically, meet the show on the terms of what they want you to talk about rather than kind of choosing what you want to talk about yourself. It felt like the queens had this weird obligation to open up. Obviously, I think some really do want to share their stories, and that's amazing. And that's why I did end up liking this challenge, because I think we got a lot of really great moments that can resonate with viewers. But then there's other people like Raja who kind of felt this pressure or obligation to open up and then felt like she did too much. I just think having conversations in this way with judging criteria kind of looming over you this whole time, it can lead to a very uncomfortable situation if you end up with a topic that you don't really want to talk about. And if you try to switch into humor mode instead of opening up, you get critiqued for it and then you get put in the bottom. I get what they're going for. Again, like I said, I personally like it, but I do understand why a lot of people think it's more of a miss. But as I'm thinking about this challenge, I'm thinking of another challenge in the same realm that I think was just done better on the show. The DragCon panels, but I think specifically the one from season 14. There's touchy topics that they did have to talk about, like fatherhood or dating, but unlike All Star 6, I feel like there was a way to get around opening up if they didn't really want to. It was in front of a live audience, so there was a lot more live humor interwoven with each of the conversations, and overall, it felt like we were listening more on the queen's terms rather than what was expected out of them. It just overall felt like they had more creative control with this one, but I don't know, maybe that's just me. So I think the show has done a really good job at showcasing these types of challenges with heavier topics, so if they keep doing them in the future, look towards the DragCon panel rather than the Pink Table Talk. With all that out of the way, let's wrap it up. Drag Race has some amazing challenges that they can always fall back on to make really great TV, but I also really like when they experiment. All of the challenges here, like the title says, are ridiculous, but that doesn't mean they're bad. Looking back at them, I like all of them a lot. Maybe the cheerleading and Drag Olympics, they are my least favorite, but even then, I think for what they were entertaining. Those types of physically demanding challenges, I think we can do without them because it just puts too much pressure on the queens to go all out, but if they still want to dip their toes into this field in the future, I think there are ways they can do it without putting the queens at risk. On the street challenges, they can't happen again, and I'm okay with that. Keep the queens safe, keep production the way they want it, that's totally fine. The variation with the magic in the soup cans, I honestly love it. You can keep doing it, keep getting ridiculous, it's really fun. And finally, like I just said, look towards the DragCon panel instead of the Pink Table Talk. It seems like a lot of the older seasons had a lot more crazy challenges or challenges that took risks because they were still trying to find their stride with what worked in the competition and entertainment. And more recently, when there's challenges that kind of divert from the norm, it feels like there's pushback from the fans. I think as fans, we should be a little more open for them to try things new and get a little ridiculous sometimes. So as long as it's judged fairly, I honestly have no problem with them doing these ridiculous challenges. They're fun to look back on and they honestly have me wanting more. Thank you guys so much for watching and sticking around to the end of the video. Comment below some more ridiculous challenges and if you want to see a part 2. I took a break last week, but I'll be here for the rest of December. I hope you guys are having happy holidays. I got some really cool videos in the works, so I'll see you soon with another video.